Hello, Josh from Missouri. How are you?
Hello. I am doing fine. I'm going to give you a fine. I am,
I feel like you're
uh,
like that's an attitude kind of thing. I'm fine.
I'm fine. Uh, that is not inaccurate. Some days that's just how you're feeling. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
fine. Okay. I'm fine. I'm
Okay.
fine.
I'm right. I'm
Uh,
sorry I asked.
I think that about covers it.
Okay.
I think I'm fine. How are you doing?
Well, geez. Yes, let's move on.
Yes,
I
I'm trying to. That's my goal here.
okay. All right. Wow, this is a testy episode. Um, yeah, no, I'm doing great. I don't know about you. You just
Ooh.
the unspiritual type over there, just in a bad mood. I mean, don't we
Hey,
have the
I
joy, 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 joy down in our heart?
I have at least once in the last 24 hours referred to myself as whiny spice when talking to my wife. So um, I I I think that about covers it. Um,
uh,
I just think maybe the joy went a little too far down, and I'm like staring down the well and can't quite see it because the well is so deep. I don't know.
wow, this is grumpy old man style.
Yeah, I thought
Uh,
we got that out in a previous episode, but
I guess not. Yeah.
it's
Uh, this is our New Year's Eve episode. And so this is where we like
yeah.
look back, look ahead, take stock, all of that stuff. And I think I know what you need to work on in 2025.
Yes. I can't change the old part, but maybe I can change the grumpy part.
I was at community group last night and I talked about how I like during the Christmas, I get referred to as a Grinch or, I get accused of being grumpy or whatever. And um, the community group leader was like, wow, I don't think of you at all that way. And I'm like, see, could you just tell my family that? That would be great.
Well, wait till he really gets to know you.
Okay.
It'll
Thanks
be
for the
good.
encouragement.
But I am excited to talk today. I will say that much. I
Okay.
am
All
looking
right.
forward to this conversation.
I am too. Lead us in.
All right. Well, as we are getting ready for a new year and we were talking about how to frame a conversation about the new year, there is an exercise that I do with folks that I coach almost every time I coach a client. And it is called the Wheel of Life. And
Mm,
it is a perfect tool to use as you are reflecting back and looking to anticipate forward, because it really invites you, first of all, to evaluate your life on a number of fronts. Really, what the Wheel of Life is, if you picture a circle that is divided into sort of slices of the pie, it's divided into eight different segments. And each segment represents an area of your life: personal growth, health, friends, family, relationships, spirituality, career, finance, uh, areas that to some degree or another we all think are important. And then what it asks you to do is it sort of looks like a target with a series of concentric circles. And so what it asks you to do is rate each of these areas of your life on a scale of 1 to 10. But really what it asks you to do is to do this twice. The first time you are rating on a scale of 1 to 10 how you're doing in each of these areas. So if somebody were to follow you around with a video camera and you were to be brutally honest just about how you're really doing in each of these areas, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate it? The second time you take it, it's not how are you doing, it's how do you want to be doing. And so this is really, it's the difference between the real and the ideal, or where you are and where you want to be. And so the second time you say, well, and you almost forget what you rated before because it doesn't really matter. You could have rated one category as a 5, and you might be perfectly okay with it being a 5. Or you might want it to be an 8. Or honestly, you sometimes there are categories you want to lower. Man, this is like I'm doing like an 7 in this area, and that just is taking a lot of emotional energy, and I'd be okay like with that only being a 4. So there's lots of different ways this can come out, but what I think is interesting is to see the gaps
Mm.
between the two versions of the test. So what I wanted to do with you is to have us both work our way through the wheel of life and then just kind of talk through our observations on it. So I emailed it to you. I'm guessing you've already taken it, but how does that sound to you?
It sounds really intriguing. And I think because on this podcast, we focus really heavily on spirituality and maybe a little bit on, say, personal growth. But very rarely do we talk about career, finance, health, recreation. Like, I guess we touch on some of those occasionally, but boy, like, there's a lot more to our day-to-day lives than we focus on this podcast, which is fine. Like, this podcast, we got to focus on something, right? It can't just be something about everything. It's not Seinfeld.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I'm fine with where we are as a podcast, but it's really intriguing to sit down in this conversation and realize there's a whole other world, or there's all these other areas of focus that should be put into balance.
Yes, that's exactly it. And to recognize, I think the thing that I'm always intrigued by is exactly what you're talking about, that I can put some work in a variety of different areas, or I might be dissatisfied in an area that I don't normally think about. One of the things I often talk about with this, I don't know if you remember Natural Church Development, which is a book we both read 20 some odd years ago in college.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember that it existed. I couldn't tell you anything of what it talked about.
so I took one of the images in the book away, and it has been a life-changing image for me.
Oh, is this
And
the
it is
barrel?
it's the barrel. Yeah.
Oh,
Have I
that's the
talked about
only
this
thing
on
I
the
remember.
podcast?
No, I just like that's the only thing I remember from that book. So
Okay.
proceed.
This
I'm
is
excited.
so important to me that I actually have a wooden slatted barrel in my office so that I can show people what I mean when I talk about a barrel.
And now we're in a non-visual environment. So good luck.
Yes. So I will have to figure out a way to help you imagine. But if you imagine an old Western style barrel that has slats going from top to bottom that are all encircled by a metal band that holds them all together. Uh, the point of this illustration is that if you had the slats all at different heights, so the lowest slat is maybe at 1 foot, the tallest slat is maybe at 4 feet, and all of the slats in the middle are a random variety of different heights. So if you were to look at the barrel, it looks very weird. So in this, using the wheel of life and this together, each of the slats of the barrel would be one of these areas of life, health or friends or family or recreation or whatever. And frequently for us, it is going to be spirituality that is sort of the tallest slat. And the reason this matters is the point the author makes is you can only fill the barrel to the level of the lowest slat.
Yeah.
But you tend to be passionate about the highest slat. And so when you want to fix the barrel, frequently what we do is say, what I really need to do is make that tallest slat taller.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
You know,
Yes.
man,
Yes.
spirituality matters a lot to me. Generally speaking, I think it's an 8. It's got to get to a 9. Don't worry about that other area that's just a 3. And his point is that doesn't actually raise the bar at all. And there are some ways this breaks down when we're talking about the wheel of life, because if you're okay with an area being a 3, then that's fine. But the point that I think it makes is that we tend to fixate on our strengths. And the danger of doing so is that we miss a broader perspective on our lives. And this is what I think the Wheel of Life really offers, is this sort of broader perspective on our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's a good way of taking stock. I I mean, again, at the new year though, I mean, there's so many uh, stereotypes of New Year's resolutions, and we all know how quickly they break down. And so, even though this is a good device for really searching out where you are and what your goals need to be and all of that, what you truly care about, I don't know that it automatically transfers into successful resolutions.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is a great place to start, but I don't think it can translate immediately into resolutions. And frankly, I don't think resolutions are the end of the preparation. And I think that's often the problem. A resolution is great if you finish preparing to accomplish it,
Mm,
but a resolution without adequate preparation on a variety of fronts, really, it's a bad plan.
yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think of Dallas Willard's VIM model,
Mm-hmm.
um, the vision, intention, and means. So you have to have a clear vision of where you're going, and that's what this exercise helps you to do, and uh, strip out and say, okay, this is actually what I care about doing. And so this helps you develop the vision, but then you really have to set your intention. That's where the resolution turns from a word into an actual feeling and an actual commitment on your part. But then you also have to develop the means. Like, I can want to learn Spanish, but unless I have a guide or a teacher or a class or time set aside for it and all the other things that are going to actually help me do that, well, that resolution's going to fall flat because I didn't put the means together.
Yes. Yeah, I have a really concrete example of this actually straight from my Wheel of Life. Before we get into kind of big picture examples, one of the, if you don't mind, a simple example of how this works out.
Yeah.
Um, in the area of health, I would say I am currently at a 7, and I really just want to get to an 8 or an 8.5 by the end of the year. I'm not looking to be perfect. My efforts towards health are pretty solid. I exercise regularly. I eat reasonably healthy. I'm doing okay. But what I recognize as the difference between a 7 and an 8 really is just that I don't drink enough water. As simple as that is, I don't drink enough water. I can tell in very practical ways, like I end up with bad breath, and I can tell in more physiological ways. There are times that like I get muscle cramps because of this. I don't drink enough water, so I want to drink more water is a fairly good vision.
Yeah.
Intention is really asking, what is this going to cost me, and am I willing to pay it? So this is going to mean I have to make some changes in my life, and frankly, that's where means gets involved as well. And so, my wife and I were talking about this just yesterday, I think because I was doing this. And so I realized I wanted to accomplish this.
Mm.
And she said, okay, well, what are you going to actually do with that? Like, how are you going to make that happen? And I said, and I was kind of playing with it. And I thought, the easiest way for me, I have tea, which is not the same thing as drinking water, which I strongly want to take that up with Jesus when I go to heaven. But um, tea goes through your system in a way that water does not. And so I said, all I need to do is make sure I have a water cup next to me whenever I'm doing a coaching session in the morning. I can have tea in the afternoon, but I got to have water in the morning. If I do that, I will immediately drink enough water and I'll be fine. So what do I need? I need a cup that I actually don't hate, and I need to do that instead of tea. And so there's the cost. The cost is tea is a really relaxing part of my life. I have drunk tea within meetings for 20 years. So I have to give that up for part of the day in order to make sure I drink enough water. And then I have my means are is literally there is a specific cup I'm going to fill up and I'm going to put it on my desk and I will drink enough water. Now that's a plan.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that's a
exactly.
whole lot better than just, man, I just need to drink more water.
Well, right. Or it's even better than like, oh, I'm going to drink 64 ounces of water every day. And that's just going to be my new, like, I'm just going to pound this home. Okay. When do you intend to drink it? And, just, yeah, all of it's an
How, right?
incomplete
You
vision.
have
Yeah,
to answer the
exactly.
how.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the means. This is otherwise you've got the.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yes.
There's without means, you don't actually have a fully functioning system. And so I think for me, the difference between a meaningful life change and a resolution often is, have I answered the question of how? Have I gotten my means in order?
Well, that's honestly what is really complicated for me about doing this exercise today. Because as I did this exercise, I realized that so many of my means are up in the air. There's a
Mm.
potential that my work hours could change. There's a potential that various pieces of our finances can change. There's the reality that my son is getting his license, and so we're not having to drive him around. And so now our time can be used differently than it once was. And so many things are on the cusp of changing, and we don't have a clear understanding of the ways in which they're changing. And so I look at a lot of this wheel of life stuff and go, man, okay, I'd really like to focus in there, and I'd like to focus in there. And I'm going, wow, but how? So much is unsettled for me right now that how is a really complicated question.
I cannot tell you how much this resonates with me. It has been fascinating to me, and tell me if this is a similar strand of thought. As I was filling this out, it's fascinating to me how much some of the greatest changes I want to make in my life are at least in part out of my control.
Mm,
So I put two of the biggest gaps in mine are in the area of career and finances.
mm,
And these are deeply tied together. I have pieced together work for the last year and a half or so since I stepped out of the pastorate. And I have gotten more and more discontent with the piecing it together as the year and a half has gone on. This is a big part of why I feel like whiny spice, to be honest. Um, so what I really want, like I would put both of these career and finances at a 3. And I really want them to be somewhere around a 7. And what I really mean is in the area of career, I want to be working as a coach full time. And in the area of finances, I really mean I want to be bringing in a full time income as a coach.
mm.
And those are perfectly reasonable goals, but I don't get to control whether people hire me or not.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting.
Yes. Yes, exactly. One of the things I want to work on is health. You have been working out consistently. I have not. You have been eating well. I have not. We eat a lot of convenience foods because we are on the go all the time. Now,
That makes sense.
some of our on the go is going to change now that my youngest son is getting his license. So I'd like to see how that shakes out, and I don't quite know all the ramifications of that yet. But I'm also waiting to find out if my work hours are going to change. If my work hours are going to change, suddenly I have an early morning time slot that allows me to go to the gym regularly. And we just switched gyms, and it's at a much more convenient location. And so I'm much more likely to go to this gym because I drive by it all the time. And so I'm excited for that change, but now I need to know how my schedule is going to shake out, or if it's going to shake out, to know how to put the pieces together in terms of when I can get to the gym. And I need to live into our new reality of not having to drive our son around all the time a little bit before I can determine, okay, what does this mean for how we're able to prepare meals and when we can prepare meals and how does grocery shopping fit in? Like, all the pieces are so up in the air.
Ah, and this raises what I think is an interesting question for me. What do you do, right? Like, what do you do in this moment of, what's the right word here? Ambiguity, uncertainty. The pieces are all up in the air, is the phrase you used.
Yeah.
Eh,
Unsettledness.
oh, yes, which is so unpleasant, by the way. Can we just put that out there in case I have not been clear? Um,
Right.
but when you are wanting to move the ball forward in one of these areas, and there is this sense of unsettledness, I guess my question is, what helps you in those moments?
I really struggle with control. I'm so tempted to just make a plan, assert control, make it happen, right? I guess that's what makes me a good dispatcher or dispatch supervisor, right? Like that's what we do. We take chaos and we bring order out of it, and we get the right thing going, and we just take control. So that's my nature. That's my instinct. But when, as you said, some things are just completely out of your control, I'm clueless. Like, it just drives me nuts. And I'm just in that state of like, can we get the pieces in place? I know what I can do with the pieces once you give them to me, but just hand them over so I can take control.
I totally resonate with this. I am an efficiency person. I am passionate about productivity. I can strong arm my will into just about any situation, and I'm good at it. Like, I can make it work.
Honestly, I feel similarly about that. How do I just get comfortable with not being in control? I feel similarly about that as I do to something you mentioned earlier on. And that is, as you take stock in this wheel of life, you might come across, you know what? I'm at an 8 here, but it's taking me a lot of energy to be an 8. And I might need to dial that back to a 5 or a 6 in order to put more energy into some of these other areas. That feels just as, I don't know, I feel just as odd about that. Like, is that really, we should be just driving forward all the time. And to put ourselves in neutral or reverse on anything feels counterintuitive to me.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. This is I mentioned when you were talking about Vim, intentionality is answering, what is this going to cost me? And I don't think we want to wrestle with that question. I think we want to believe we have an infinite number of resources, an infinite amount of time, an infinite amount of energy, an infinite amount of capacity, as if these were, yeah, they're unlimited resources. And so we can just keep going for it rather than admitting, boy, if I want to level up in the area of career, it may cost me something in the area of personal growth, or it may cost me something in the area of friends, or it may cost me something in the area of spirituality. And can I be honest with somebody about, is that a cost I actually want to pay, without there being a presumed right answer?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of my biggest observations from this, honestly, is as I look at personal growth, that has been a hallmark of my last few years, right? I think I entered seminary January of 2019. And so we're staring down January of 2025. So that was 6 years ago. And I personal growth is that whole experience was personal growth for me. And since then, I'm like, I've just got this buzz. Like I let's keep growing, right? Let's keep learning. And I've been really focused there, but I haven't been very focused on my health. I haven't been very focused on recreation. I haven't been focused enough on my marriage. Like those are all things that need attention and probably need me to take a big step back in personal growth. I might need to read fewer books. I might need to translate less. I might need to not focus on, a whole host of things that I care about in order to focus on some other things that I care about and need to care about more.
Yeah. Well, and can I quibble with your language just a little bit?
Please.
It's not need to, it's want to. This is not an external, you're being forced to do it situation.
Right. Right.
This is, who do you want to be? You want to care about your marriage more. You want to care about your health more. And that's where I think it really has to be an honest question. Okay, so are you willing to, for better or worse, to pay the price and slow down your personal growth to pay that price, if that's what it means, right? I think that's a really valid question, but it has to be a legitimate question
Yeah.
because so often we don't give ourselves the space. And this comes back to, what do you do in that moment when things are up in the air? I think this is a perfect moment to ask these questions and wrestle with these costs. And this is part of looking the discomfort in the face. I think when we pause and look at uncomfortable part of us, what that uncomfortable part of us is saying is, I am not okay with my life the way it is.
Yeah.
And that is actually the piece of us that can energize us to make different choices with some of these categories and can energize us to say, yes, I'm willing to pay the price over here in order to get the gain that I want over here.
Right. And it's not just personal cost, right?
Mm.
It's also perception, right? You just corrected my language and said this is not external pressure to change these things. This is internal desire. But separating the two is not always easy. And a case in point, as I look at career, my career, I said my career right now is at a 5. And when I look honestly at where I want my career to be in the coming year, it's a 5. I'm like, it is taking right now the right amount of energy from me. It is, I don't need to press into my career. I don't need to try to seek advancement. I don't need to put all my eggs in that basket right now. I have enough eggs in that basket that I don't feel deficient, but I don't feel superior. I am where I need to be with my career. But external pressure, right? If my boss were to listen to this, if my coworkers were to listen to this or whatever, like, are they okay with me just going, yeah, I'm a 5 and I'm going to stay a 5? That feels, I don't know. It feels irresponsible. But I'm a whole orbed person. And so you have to set aside some of the external pressures in particular areas and just say, okay, where do I really want to put my efforts?
I think you're absolutely right. We culturally believe you ought to be moving forward in all of these all the time. So, like, yes, there should be career advancement all the time. Yes, there should be recreational advancement all the time. Yes, there should be health advancement all the time. Yes, there should be personal growth advancement all the time. Yes, there should be financial advancement all the time. And that is an unsustainable way to live. And you're absolutely right, though. It is countercultural to ignore the pressure, to not to ignore it, to acknowledge it and acknowledge that I am not listening to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I think the piece of us that we often try to ignore, because we're trying to ignore the part of us that is expressing discomfort, right? Even by doing something. Whereas I think if we welcome that piece of us into the conversation, there is a whole host of sort of middle steps between realizing there's a problem and solving it. And it is that discomfort that offers us the energy to take those middle steps that actually give us the opportunity to solve the problem in reality rather than either just in a short term way or to fail at solving the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think to simplify all of that, I think you have expressed in the past an axiom that I actually quoted to a coworker just the other day. So I hope I'm quoting you accurately. That
If not, you've
leaders,
got your own axiom.
yeah, right. That leaders step into the awkward.
Mm. Yes, the way I often say it is leaders absorb the awkwardness. So,
Okay,
yes,
yeah,
same
there you
exact
go.
idea. Yep.
But if we're going to take charge of our own lives and we're going to make some decisions about how best to live, it means stepping into the awkwardness and saying, okay, where do I feel uncomfortable? Where do I feel these points of tension? And being really, really honest about that.
Hmm. Yeah. And trying to parse that out a little bit. What's fascinating to me is how often the knee jerk attempt to solve the problem often solves the presenting problem rather than the real problem.
Hmm. Tell me more about that.
So I'm like looking at my list for an area that would be a good example of this. Let's take on mine. I mentioned that I want to make a full time income coaching, not self employed. Like I want to be paid by companies to coach, whatever. But I want a certain income. Why do I really, when I sit down with that and ask, why do I really want that level, this particular level of income? The honest answer is because that is a way of contributing to my family and it is a way of taking pressure off my wife's paycheck.
Sure.
If I were not paying attention to that underlying discomfort and what's really going on there, it would be very easy to prioritize career and financial growth in a way that actually caused more pressure to my family and to my wife. Because, for example, there are a number of companies I could work for right now, and the only cost it would have would be I would have to give up dinner with my family because a lot of companies want you to work in coaching, sort of the 5 to 9 spot, because that's
Mm.
when people are available. Well, we have determined as a family, and my wife and I have determined together that my being the engine for dinner, being the driver for dinner, is really important to our family culture. If I were to give that up for any amount of money, it would not take pressure off my wife. It would add pressure to her. It would not make our
Mm.
family life better. It would make our family life worse. And so I would be meeting my stated goal while failing at the underlying goal because I was just sort of knee jerk reacting to it.
Mm. Boy, that's
And
so insightful.
does that make sense? Like there are several jobs that I've had to say no to because it would only meet the presenting problem and not the underlying issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, I mean, so to plug your work a little bit, you said at the very beginning, you do this with a lot of your coaching clients. And so you have lots of experience at guiding people through this type of exercise and objectively evaluating these types of things. And so I wonder, what do you think are, from your perspective as a coach, watching from the other side of this process, what are the advantages of having somebody like a coach or some external agent to process this with?
It's fascinating to me how often, even in a friendship context, the other person is still invested in your answer, right? You share a moral framework And so the other person wants you to like live into the moral framework that you both share. Or, you know, let's say I were wanting to decrease, the only place in my life I could decrease right now would be friendship. And so that's going to have an impact on your life. So you're invested,
Mm,
even if you were to talk to me about not caring about improving your marriage. Well, I'm friends with your wife. Like, I want you to win there, not just for you, but because I know your wife. I I literally talked on the phone with one of your kids this week.
yeah. Right.
Like, there's an investment that goes beyond one-on-one that makes it hard to give the distance that is necessary. I often say to my clients, let me just be honest. You can answer this however you want, and I don't care, in the best way possible, because I'm going to sleep just fine tonight. And so I want to give you space to answer your answer, whatever that may be. I want to give you space to discover your values. And I have a 0% investment in what the answer is going to be. And so you get to be whoever you want to be. And
Mm,
frequently that's what I think people need, is somebody who's genuinely listening without personal investment. And that's hard. Not not always can not always should, forget can, not always should friendship be that. We often joke about the fact that our friendship started with me saying to you, "Hey, I want you to kick me in the butt when I'm wrong." That
mm.
is not a disinvested response.
Sure.
And so I think that's part of what coaching offers. The other piece of what coaching offers that's a little different from friendship is it offers the energy. If you are leaning on a friend, that friend may or may not have the energy to like give you the space to admit that you're not following your own rules. And they may not be following their own rules. And so like whatever the goals are, if you're not living up to them, that's an emotionally complicated conversation for your friend to have with you. And second, somebody has to be the emotional driver on continuing to come back to this topic. It's so easy to let something slide,
Mm,
especially in the midst of crazy life where a million things are going on in your life, a million things are going on in my life. And in a friendship, it's your job to sort of ride that ebb and flow. In a coaching relationship, it's my job to say, hey, the main goal you set yourself to be working on right now is this particular thing. In this moment, do you want to come back to that main goal, or is there something else you want to focus on? But let's make it an intentional decision, not an accidental decision.
mm.
And again, that's not friendship. Friendship just lets you ride it, like whatever's going on in life. So I think those are some of the things that make coaching a little different from friendship and things like that, that make it kind of invaluable, both in my personal experience on both sides of the coaching sort of
Yeah.
framework.
Well, I'm going to, just turn this into a commercial then, because I can imagine an audience member or two at the very least going, hey, wait, that actually sounds pretty productive. So Josh from Missouri, if they wanted to reach out to you and say, hey, actually, I would love some coaching. Is there any way that they can reach you and make that happen?
Yeah, we'll put in our social media stuff and in our show notes, we can put the link. The best way to really sort of start to parse this out, coaching is deeply relational. So it's not a matter of reading about the information. It's a matter of setting up a time for us to talk. I do video sessions all the time, and I'll put the link in both of those places where you can set up a pre-consult session. And the reason that first session is always free is because it's an opportunity to decide if this really is going to work for you. And so we can make a time to talk. And I would love to do that. There's a reason I do this for a living, because I love helping people move forward. And it's fascinating. I always come back to this story of a guy. He's a He does stock trading. And ever since the pandemic, one of the challenges he's dealt with is that his office is now at his house. And in any given day, he could have $1 million trades that are costing his company tens of thousands of dollars. There's a lot of stress involved in all of that. And he has to open his office door, and there's his wife. And how do you transition in all of that? And so that was what he came into coaching with, was essentially he wanted to grow in the area of family. And this is what he identified as was the issue. And it's cool because by the end of our coaching relationship, his wife was saying to him, wow, coaching changed my life. Forget how it changed your life. My life is better, and I'm not even the person getting coached. And that's what it's all about, right? It's all about helping the person make real practical change that actually is visible to the other people in their lives. And when that happens, it's just the funnest thing in the world.
Wow. What a cool story. What a cool experience that you've had. That's so cool.
Yeah, I love it. I love what I get to do, and would be delighted to work with folks. And it is far more affordable than you think. One of the reasons I also went into coaching is that most of the coaches I knew were charging an arm and a leg, and I don't have to do that, and I don't want to do that.
All right. So obviously we're going to put a link in the show notes. Is there a website or some other contact information we can just say on the podcast?
Oh, sure. You can always go to my website is associateleadership.com, and there's a link there to schedule a free consult session. And that's a great way to get in touch with me. Again, I would encourage a lot of the stuff that's there is focused on coaching pastors. So it may or may not be relevant to people that are listening, but it is the easiest way to get to the link that's scheduling a free consult conversation.
Okay. Awesome. And to the audience, we will also be putting a link to the PDF of this Wheel of Life if you would like to use this exercise. If you would like to take it to evaluate where you are and take it again to evaluate where you would like to be and see what that brings to the surface. It might make some really good fodder for your own reflection or a conversation with a coach. And if I may say so, I think Josh from Missouri is an excellent one.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. But I'm also curious, I just always love hearing, what else have you been thinking about, Josh from Oregon?
Yeah. So I got a good ways through a book called Biblical Critical Theory before it had to go back to the library. So I will have to get back in line with it. And this is amazing. I just think it's kind of a scary title. I think there's a lot of animosity around some other critical theories that we have in our society right now. And so it sounds like, oh gosh, is this going to be some wildly liberal book or something like that? It's actually wonderful theology and philosophy all thrown together to evaluate the worldview that the Bible espouses and how it adds to the conversation of the overall meaning of life or meaning of various aspects of life. And the biblical worldview needs to be taken seriously on its own merits. And so this just does an amazing job of showing what the world is thinking in these polar extremes at times, and how the Bible kind of cuts diagonally across these extremes to say it's got a whole different worldview that adds to the conversation. And one of these things that it talked about is kind of, to oversimplify, this dualism between nature versus nurture. Are we predestined to act out exactly what our genetic code says, or does the way we're raised have some influence on who we are and who we become? And what this author does in talking about the Noah story was so fascinating to me, because he said, look, at that time, the Bible says everybody was basically all evil all the time. There was nothing about Noah's environment that would invite him to be something else. There was nothing about his genes being born a sinner that would invite him to be something else. By all accounts, he should have also been all evil all the time. And yet, there was this grace. There was this supernatural something that changed the obvious trajectory of his life. And so the Bible says that Noah was a righteous man. And you go, where did that come from? That's clearly not the way he was raised. That's clearly not part of his genes. This is a third way. This is a miraculous dimension. This is grace. And it was a really helpful part of the conversation, nature versus nurture, and that's not the whole story, but it was also a really hopeful thing for me, just personally hearing you are not destined to be one way or the other on anything. There is this supernatural work of God that must be factored into the conversation, that must be factored into your imagination of what comes next and who you can become. That's what grace is.
It's incredible. And that's just one small nugget from what sounds like a very incredible book.
Oh gosh. And the book is heavy. It's tough sledding. It's just lots of philosophy and then lots of good theology to balance that out. And it's just, it takes you on journey after journey after journey, just like that. So I'm looking forward to finishing the book.
That's incredible.
Yeah. But I'm also looking forward to hearing what you've been thinking about.
This is just a small note from reading the Bible recently. I've been reading, I was diving into 1 Corinthians, and 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 1 through 9 is Paul's introduction. And he, first of all, mentions Jesus 9 times in those first 9 verses.
Wow.
That's a lot. And he uses the phrase, the Lord Jesus Christ, the full version of that, at least 5 or 6 of those 9. And I was just caught by how powerful this phrase is to bring together the authority of the word Lord, the humanness and the character revealed by Jesus in the Gospels, and the way in which that person with that authority plays into the overarching reality of God's millennia-long plan as the Christ. And practically speaking, and more since our study of Revelation months ago, when I hear the word Christ, I am deeply mindful of the fact that the plan of God involved the crucifixion, that the identity of Jesus is defined by the fact that the crucifixion was a natural next step for him. Like, he didn't necessarily want to do that, but it was natural for him. And so for all of this to be wrapped up in this one phrase, I just am captivated by the fact, first, that there is so much richness in this simple phrase, the Lord Jesus Christ, that we've heard a million times. And second, that Paul is also captivated by this phrase, so much so that in this long, long letter in which he is going to, he's going to appeal to the church. And his appeal, according to verse 10, is by the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. This is where he wants to start his whole conversation. Hey guys, I got a lot of hard things to talk to you about. So here's what I need you to remember. I need you to remember the Lord Jesus Christ and his very name. That's where I want you to keep your attention while I'm talking to you. Okay? Now let's talk.
That's so good.
It's just incredible to me. Like, it's just powerful and mind-boggling and deep and profound and yet simple and all at the same time. So that's what I'm thinking about.
What a good thing to be thinking about. I feel like we could dive into a whole episode on that.
I know. I feel like we could. But in order to avoid us having another deep conversation, how about I bring us along to a Which Josh question?
Yeah. All right. Fine.
And,
Go ahead.
And this Which Josh question is not as goofy as many of them are. I'm super excited about this one. It's which Josh is going on a mission trip?
Yeah. And that is me. So those who have been following our podcast for some time will undoubtedly know parts of this story, but our church partners with an orphanage out in Aizawl, India, or Aizawl is a city in Mizoram, a state in India. So there you go. So our church has partnered with them for a long, long time. After we joined this church, Shelley and our daughter went out there, knowing that my daughter just loves kids and loves working with kids and has always been drawn toward missions. And so this was kind of, by all intents and purposes, this was our daughter's trip, but we felt like we needed to send a parent along. And so Shelley's job was really to go on the trip and then try to stay in the background and let our daughter really dive into the trip and into that experience. And she did that wonderfully. And so we just knew that that was going to be part of it. Well, then, and then my daughter came back. She's like, okay, I got to go back. I got to go back. And she told her younger brother, like, you should go with me. So he went the next year. And so it was just the two of them, not just the two of them. They went with the rest of with other members of our church, but no parent went. And so it was a really awesome experience again for my daughter to kind of take the reins and to lead her brother through that trip. And then for him to experience an overseas trip and to experience working with these kids in this orphanage. He responded so amazing to this. Like, this was transformative for him in ways that I didn't expect. I expected that he was going to go and have a great time. He was going to invest himself. It was going to be a great experience. He was going to learn about other cultures, all of that. I did not expect him to be as connected with the kids, to be as connected with the mission of going and serving these kids and just being with them relationally, and how much he would desire to go back. And so he got off the plane last year and looked at me and said, Dad, you and I are going next year. And sure enough, he and I are going this year with a team from our church. And so I'm so excited to go and again, kind of let him not lead per se, but, you know, be the subject matter expert that shows me the ropes and teaches me the way and brings me into an experience that he had. And now we get to share together. I'm so excited, one, for the trip, but two, for what this will do in him to feel as though he's the expert leading his dad through something. And so, yeah, I'm so excited for this trip.
That's incredible. So, man, what could be better than your kid making you go on a mission trip with them?
Yeah, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations. I look forward to updates about how the trip goes.
Yeah, I look forward to giving them.
All right.
So until then, maybe we should have another conversation next week, which is 2025.
Ooh, all right, let's do it. I'll talk to you then.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.